Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well and safe. Thank you for joining us for the seventh lecture in the History of Palestine series. We're almost done with the course, subhanAllah. We only have 3 lectures to go. Thank you, Dr. Khalid, again for giving us these insightful lectures and for your precious time. Just to quickly remind everyone to fill in the attendance form, inshallah, in the chat there and in the group chat as well. We will start this session, inshallah, continuation from the last session. So, inshallah, we can start when you're ready, inshallah, Dr. Khalid.
Okay, thank you very much for this again. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Yes, time is flying pretty quickly. We are in our seventh lesson, and today we are discussing a very important topic. We are discussing the liberation of Salahuddin to al-Masjid al-Aqsa and to Bayt al-Maqdis. In our discussion last week, we discussed the Crusades and what the Crusades have done in the area of Bayt al-Maqdis and in al-Masjid al-Aqsa, the savages of the Crusaders and how they have destroyed, killed, wiped everything off the face of the earth. And I recommended that you watch the Al Jazeera documentary on the crusade. Today we will be discussing how we started last week, how Muslim scholars such as Imam al-Sulami, Imam al-Harawi, and great other scholars took steps to try to wake up this ummah. And the case of what happened with Imam al-Harawi in Baghdad, and later on his assassination, and this movement, this intellectual movement, this movement of scholars actually made a huge step in trying to break people away from what they were going through. And when we look at the situation of the Crusades and the situation today, actually there are many similarities in this regard. The Crusades, the first person to be able to stand up against the Crusade and one of their counties in Bilad Sham was Imaduddin when he took Arruha from the Crusaders. We discussed Imaduddin, who he was, and what he had done, and how he was assassinated during the siege of Jabar. This is where we stopped last week. Today we continue with his son. Actually, his son was Nuruddin Mahmud, the just king, and he was born after Bayt al-Maqdis has been under occupation for around 20 years. He was a very pious, righteous ruler, and there are many stories. Actually, in today's discussion, we have a lot of really fascinating stories. If the time allows us, then we will go through some of these very interesting stories about what happened during the Crusader period. He ruled Aleppo, and after the assassination of his father, he made it his base for his campaign against the Crusades, and he managed to destroy the Second Crusade. The Second Crusade came to take Damascus, and in return, he was able to bring Damascus under his fold. Actually, it was a very long story how he managed to take Damascus, because Damascus was a very strategic city, and it was aligned with the Crusaders. So they had the ruler of Damascus was in a way aligned with the Crusaders. Even he had a Crusader base inside Damascus. However, Nuruddin knew the importance of Damascus, and for this reason he protected it and brought it under his realm. Also, he married the daughter of the ruler of Damascus. Sometimes in these ages, to resolve many of the problems, this was one of the ways that this could be done. While he was, once he started, his campaign was based on three moves, as we discussed. And one of them was spreading knowledge. He established a lot of madrasas, a lot of um, a lot of places where knowledge was disseminated. People were able to learn and come back to Allah in a sense, and also learn the importance of jihad and learn the importance of Bayt al-Maqdis. So the first part of the strategy for the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis was knowledge. The second is quite difficult and was the most difficult for Nuruddin and later for Salahuddin. And had Salahuddin built up on what his teacher Nuruddin achieved, he would have made things a little quicker. However, there was some disagreements that caused some delays, particularly after the death of Nuruddin. Uniting the Muslims across Asham, the Fertile Crescent, particularly from northern Iraq all the way to southern Turkey and all of Syria, was a quite difficult task. However, Nuruddin Mahmud took a chance where he was able to bring Egypt under his control. And this bringing Egypt was quite crucial because the people of Bilad al-Sham and Iraq were Sunni. The people of Egypt were ruled by Shi'i Fatimid rulers, whom we have discussed before. So uniting the Muslims under one umbrella was quite a difficult task. And uniting Sunni Muslims and trying to bring all Muslims under one banner was a very difficult task. But Nuruddin Zenki took the chance when the Wazir of Egypt came to seek his help. So he came and asked for help in order to one of the other ministers managed to topple him. So he came to Nuruddin and he said to him, "We would like your help so I can be reinstated as the Grand Wazir of Egypt." Nuruddin took this chance and had a foothold now in Egypt. So the strategy was based on three things. We've discussed knowledge, the importance of Bayt al-Maqdis. Second, uniting Muslims. And third was the liberation of al-Masjid al-Aqsa and Bayt al-Maqdis. And the liberation of al-Aqsa and Bayt al-Maqdis is not something that is simple and isn't just for Palestinians. We are talking about here Nuruddin as a Turkish leader, Salahuddin as a Kurdish leader. This idea of nationalism and I'm Turkish, I'm Arabic, I'm this, I'm that, did not exist at that time. This issue of nationalism was not an issue that was as it is today. Now we come to Salahuddin. Salahuddin was born roughly about 40 years after Bayt al-Maqdis had been under occupation. He was born on a night that his father saw it as a bad omen for the family because they had to escape Tikrit in Iraq, and in trying to escape, this child was born. So it was a very difficult time for the family while they had to be forcibly leave their home. This child was born on on that night. He spent much of his young age in Syria, in Bilad al-Sham, between Baalbek and Damascus and different cities. And he had a very luxurious life as the son of the governor of his father became one of the governors of Nuruddin. So he had a relatively luxurious life. And when his uncle Asaduddin, the lion of religion, Asaduddin Sherko, told him to come with him to Egypt, he did not want to go, and his uncle had to force him to join him on his trip to Egypt. However, it was not just one visit to Egypt. It happened over a few. There are a few visits that eventually led to his uncle becoming the Grand Wazir of Egypt. His uncle Asaduddin becoming the Grand Wazir of Egypt. Then he died, and the Khalif, the Fatimid Khalif, appointed Salahuddin as the Wazir of Egypt. And he actually chose Salahuddin because he thought he's a young, inexperienced, easy to manipulate person. So for that reason, the Fatimid Khalif chose Salahuddin because of these traits. However, Salahuddin, with the help of his father, once he became the Wazir of Egypt, Nuruddin sent his father, who is an experienced politician, to be by his side and to support him and to help him go through this process. When he became the Wazir of Egypt, Salahuddin's life changed 180 degrees. Salahuddin's life became centered around Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa and centered his goal in life, his ultimate goal was to liberate Al-Aqsa and Bayt al-Maqdis from the Crusades. And this we hear directly from Salahuddin's mouth, as recorded by his secretary or scholar who was always by his side, Ibn Shaddad. And the moment that Salahuddin, with no experience, is chosen as the governor of Egypt, this is what he says actually, and this is the quotation directly from Ibn Shaddad, who was by the side of Salahuddin. He says, "When Allah enabled me to gain Egypt, I realized that Allah willed me the conquest of the Syrian coast, the Holy Land, because He put that idea in my mind." Salahuddin's life is now centered around liberating Bayt al-Maqdis. This was the turning point in Salahuddin's life. And this is, each one of us needs to think, what is the turning point for him in his connection with Bayt al-Maqdis? As we have said over and over again, that this is not a Palestinian issue. Salahuddin was not even Palestinian. He had no connection with this land. However, he had this connection because of Islam, the importance that it has for him as a Muslim. So Salahuddin made this his goal. And however, the Crusaders, then when they realized that Salahuddin will unite Syria and Egypt, they were pretty afraid, because they knew that their end, if there is unity in the first circle around the Holy Land, then the end of this buffer state, the end of this foreign state in the heart of the Muslim world will not continue. And we can see from the sixth Grand Master of the Knight Templars, he said his greatest fear was that a single Muslim prince, Emir, would reunite the two most powerful realms of Islam, Cairo and Damascus, and abolish the very name of Christian. Also, the same is recorded by Ibn Shaddad. He says, when the Crusaders knew what Salahuddin things are starting to settle for Salahuddin in Egypt, then they make it extremely difficult that he will definitely take the land that they have occupied, and he will uproot them from this land once he has power in Egypt. So the Crusaders prepared the army and headed towards Egypt to occupy. And actually, they had support from various different Christian rulers. The Byzantines helped in the siege, the marital siege of Dimyat on the Mediterranean Sea. The Crusaders came by land and sea and came to occupy and end the strength of Salahuddin. So what you see here is that they were not afraid of the Fatimid Khalif or the king or the previous wazirs. Now, with someone in place in Egypt who has a clear vision for the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis and the Holy Land, then they were quite afraid of what the consequences will happen. And this reminds us of what happened a few years ago in Egypt when the general elections in Egypt brought around Morsi. And Morsi, when Gaza was attacked, opened the borders with Gaza and allowed all the aid to go through. Israel didn't like this. This is the first time. Mubarak never ever did this. Now there is a change of power. And when things started to go bad in Syria, he said he would support the Syrian revolution. For this reason, he was toppled, and Israel supported Sisi, and Sisi was seen as a hero for the Zionist state. That Israel paid for his PR campaign in the United States to make sure that his image is fighting Islamic terrorists and so on and so forth. This was the image that they would like to present to the Western public. And Israel paid for his PR campaign, which is a few hundred or a few million dollars to try to achieve this. And this is quite interesting that why Israel saw Sisi as an ally and Morsi as an enemy. This, when we talk about history repeating itself, had we learned from the mistakes of the past, we wouldn't be in the same boat that we are in today. However, let's get back to the Crusades. They were afraid of what this would mean for them, and they started to try to end Salahuddin's and Nuruddin's presence in Egypt. And these are the dates that in the map that you see, the dates that Salahuddin went back and forth to Egypt. However, the siege of Dimyat in 1169, with the armies coming by land, with the support of the navy, Dimyat was under siege. It was one of the most difficult wars. People were nearly done and finished in the citadel. They started eating cats. They had nothing else to eat. And Salahuddin tried his best to keep to resist this. However, what happened is quite interesting. It reminds us of what happened during the Battle of the Trench, when the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ and the Muslim armies were nearly destroyed. They had no hope whatsoever. And then Allah sent wind that destroyed the camps of the enemy. The same case in Dimyat, wind destroyed the ships, the besieging ships, and forced the Crusaders to retreat, thinking that Salahuddin was well supplied, because he had a trick to make them think that he can last the siege for a very long period of time when he had nothing really on the table. Once things started to settle for Salahuddin in Egypt, actually it didn't settle directly. Nuruddin asked Salahuddin to end, this is quite interesting, to end the Fatimid Khilafah. And Salahuddin was very hesitant. To end the Fatimid Khilafah is to topple the Khalif and to make dua on the Friday sermon for the Khalif in Baghdad. So to bring all of this Muslim land under one ruler, the Khalif in Baghdad. And what is interesting is that unity has a symbolic meaning, but also it actually reflects that instead of having two heads for the Muslims, let's just have one head for the Muslim state. So instead of an Abbasid and a Fatimid Khilafah, let's just have the Abbasid Khilafah. So Salahuddin hesitated, and he tried to delay this process until the death of the Fatimid Khalif, who was very ill. Actually, the Fatimid Khalif Salahuddin created very close friendship with him, that he entrusted his own children to Salahuddin, and on the day that he died, the Fatimid Khilafah ceased to exist. However, not many people were happy, especially those who were part of this old system. Although Salahuddin was part of this system, what brought him into power was the Fatimid Khalif. Now he toppled the Fatimid Khilafah and ended it. However, the Mu'taman al-Khilafah, the various civil servants, including Sunni ulama and Shia ulama, were not happy with this and did not want to be associated with the Abbasids. So they attempted to have a coup against Salahuddin. And this is really interesting, and this is when I said a little earlier, had we learned from history what happened in Egypt with the coup of Sisi would not have happened had we learned from the example of Salahuddin. I'll tell you the example of Salahuddin, and you can make the parallels if you wish, or we can make them at the end of our discussion if you ask them in the Q&A part. What happened is one of the Sunni ulama came to Salahuddin and he said to him, "I'm really sorry, I was part of the coup that is there to topple you. This is what they're planning, and Allah had sent you to us, and we are planning a coup against you. Let's change this." Salahuddin says to him, "No, you continue. Go back. This is really interesting. Go back, continue the preparations. Just keep me updated." So he had an internal spy who was bringing him information of what their plans. And on the day that the coup was going to start, Salahuddin, everyone had assembled in their headquarters. Salahuddin encircled them and executed all the leaders of the coup. So this was the first coup against Salahuddin. Then there was a second coup, 50,000 from Sudan, who were slaves of Mu'taman al-Khilafah. They also rebelled against Salahuddin, nearly ended Salahuddin in Egypt. It took Salahuddin a few years to settle things in Egypt. And Nuruddin was impatient with the idea of liberating Al-Aqsa and liberating Bayt al-Maqdis. And he wanted Salahuddin to move quicker than Salahuddin was actually moving. And this created some disagreement between Nuruddin and Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, is particularly when they were going to meet at Karak, a midpoint between them and to attack the Crusader citadel in Karak. However, Salahuddin, he was en route. Then his father fell ill, so Salahuddin retreated back to Egypt and sent a message to Nuruddin apologizing for not being able to make it because things are still haven't settled in Egypt, and he's afraid that if his father something would happen to him, then this would have a negative effect on their presence in Egypt. So he returns back to Egypt, and during this period, Nuruddin Zinki passes away. When Nuruddin Zinki dies, everything that he had united across the Syrian, Iraqi, and Anatolian lands, everything started to break apart. And this was a very big challenge for Salahuddin. Now the project is falling apart. Only Egypt, and Salahuddin didn't stick to Egypt. Actually, Salahuddin extended his realm westwards. He went all the way to Tunisia, Libya, to all the way to Tunisia, in the south to Sudan, even to Yemen. And after the death of his teacher, he marched towards Syria. He took Damascus with 700 of his men. The people of Hama and Aleppo fought, and Mosul fought against Salahuddin for a very long period of time. And it took Salahuddin another 14 years to reunite what his teacher had achieved. And Salahuddin would fight the people of Aleppo. He would be victorious. He would take his prisoners, give them all gifts. Yes, you heard me right. Salahuddin would take all the prisoners, give them gifts, and say, let's work together for the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis. However, they would go back to their citadel and come out and fight Salahuddin again. And Salahuddin spent actually more than 2/3 of his time fighting Muslims before fighting the Crusades. And you might find this very strange. But actually, do not. Just look around the leaders of the Muslim world today. All of them are no better than the rulers 900 years ago. They all wanted to have, actually, many of them would put their hands in the hands of the Crusaders to fight against Salahuddin. And this is quite interesting, that they would align themselves with the Crusaders to try to kill Salahuddin, to try to get rid of Salahuddin. And this continued for, I mentioned 7 years in Egypt and another 14 years across Syria and southern Turkey today and Iraq. And it was the most difficult thing in the strategy for the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis. We said the first one was knowledge. The second one is uniting Muslims before the liberation of al-Masjid al-Aqsa. This was not the only threat. I'm not sure if some of you watched some of the Turkish series like the Seljuks, the Great Seljuk. At that time, there was another threat, not just the Crusaders, but also the Batinis, the Hashashin, who were also, for money, have tried to assassinate Salahuddin a couple of times. There's many interesting stories of different assassinations of Salahuddin, which even one of the assassins had his knife literally on the neck of Salahuddin, and Salahuddin says, Allah did not save me except for something that is great. Just to give you some hope, if you look at this map, this is the same map that today across the Muslim world is boiling. And it seems that the geography is still exactly the same, starting from Egypt, Tunisia, Sudan, Yemen, Syria, Iraq, All these areas were essential in the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis at the time of Salahuddin, and they seem actually what happened in the what they called the Arab Spring was actually this revival against the tyrants who are and actually it got much worse after that with governments like the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain and uh, Morocco and Sudan and other countries aligning themselves and normalizing relationship with Israel. As much of this actually is a repetition of history, and these people, their end will be disastrous. Like one of the governors who aligned himself with the Crusaders at the time of Nuruddin, and the moment that Nuruddin took that city, he ran to the Crusaders, and he's no use to the Crusaders anymore. So he has no value whatsoever, and you see this with many of the traitors that when their expiry date finishes, they have no value even to their closest allies because their value is already diminished. So let's go back to Salahuddin and see the life of Salahuddin. As we said, he was born around 40 years after the occupation of Bayt al-Maqdis. He saw the Second Crusade. He worked with his uncle. He became the lieutenant in Egypt. And then it took Salahuddin, you see all this in green is what it took for Salahuddin to try to unite the Muslims into one state in which it includes full control of Egypt and continuing on the road to liberate Bayt al-Maqdis. There is a few stories I can tell you because stories are the best way to understand history. Uh, the Crusaders, Salahuddin actually had a temporary ceasefire with the Crusaders, and the Crusaders continued to break these agreements. So one of them, uh, Renaud de Châtillon, or as Muslim sources call him, Arna, would attack the Muslim caravans going to Mecca and Medina. Uh, and his place, he was based in Karak. You see, if I show you where Karak is and what Karak is here, the last green part here, and he would attack anyone going to Hajj. He has both roads from Egypt and Syria of people going to Hajj and Umrah. So he would attack the people and kill many of them. And he had a great business idea. This story, many of you will be shocked to hear. But after he would capture people, uh, and um, try to interrogate some of them. Why are you going to Mecca and Medina? They say, well, the house of God is in Mecca, and in Medina we go to visit Prophet Muhammad. So he had an idea of going to Medina, digging up the grave of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and taking it to France. This today, when we talk about France and its enmity against Islam, the Islamophobia we see in France is not new. Actually, Renaud de Châtillon wanted to go to Medina, dig up the grave of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and take his blessed body to France. That anyone who wishes from the Muslims to come and visit Muhammad would have to pay taxes to the French. This was the plan of Renaud de Châtillon. And you will be shocked that he managed to achieve this. Actually, he went from Kerak, he took the port city of Ayla, and from Ayla, he took the ships all the way to Yanbu. And Yanbu is the closest port to Medina. And he actually challenged the whole of the Muslim Ummah. He made it public that what he is going to do. And he said, "Who will save Muhammad from my hands?" And Salahuddin swore, Salahuddin at that time, he was in the most northern part of his realm, and he was trying to unite the Muslims there to work with him for the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis. But now the danger is very great. Renaud de Chatillon is going to Medina. He's going to take the grave of the Prophet. What would Salahuddin do? If you were in the position of Salahuddin, what would you have done? Salahuddin, do you think? Let's give you two choices. The 40 people with us just now. Would you continue what you're working on? Would you delegate this work to someone else? Or would you leave directly to Medina? I gave you three options. So if each one of you, Amna, if you can help me with seeing the answers. Would you, number one, so write 1, 2, or 3. Number one is, what did we say? Number one was continue what you were doing and delegate the work to someone else. Number two, leave what you are doing and head directly to Medina. Let's make them just two options. So let's see if we have the engagement, if everyone is still with us and not asleep. Any answers coming or not yet? Okay, two answers. Zainab, Abdul, Sayyid, Imran. All of you are saying that you would leave what you are doing and head directly to Medina. Noor Sakina is also saying the same. But remember, Salahuddin is in the most northern part of his kingdom. It would take him over a month to reach. And already Renaud de Chatillon had taken the ships and is heading towards Medina. Let's see. Everyone's going with number 2. Bushra also, Raj is going for number 2. This shows, and 007 also says he will go for number 2. Actually, Salahuddin did exactly the opposite. And it's not because Salahuddin does not love the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He loves him more than he loves anything else in the world. However, Salahuddin, as a strategist, he knew that he would not make it in time. And by that time, Renaud de Chatillon would have already dug up the Prophet's grave. She actually says, yes, Sayyid, thank you. That's why we are not good strategists. Our emotions are getting the best of us. This is the purpose. Thank you very much, Sayyid. This is the purpose of our lesson, this series of lectures, is to move away from emotions to try to build a strategy based on knowledge. And Salahuddin, he delegated this work immediately to someone who can make it in time. Actually, even the person that he delegated the work to might not make it in time. We love the Prophet Muhammad more than we love ourselves, our families, our children. He is the most beloved to our heart. But in order, and this is, thank you again, Sayyid. Actually, when the Prophet ﷺ's name is desecrated by a cartoonist or a journalist or a Zionist, what is the Muslim response? The Muslim response has been all we do is we go out in a demonstration and try to shout and get at least feel that you've done something. But in reality, what have you done to really protect the name and the honor of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Allah says in the Quran in Surah At-Tawbah, verse 40, إِلَّا تَنْصُرُوهُ فَقَدْ نَصَرَهُ اللَّهُ. If you do not support him, Allah will support him. We need to move away from acting emotionally and being responsive. Do not just be a reactor to someone else's action. You have to create action. And this is what is important. Creating action is by setting an example of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in your life, in everything that we are doing. And although I don't want to underestimate or undermine the importance of demonstrations, but just demonstrations on their own do not really have an impact. You need to follow it up. And sometimes actually they have a negative impact rather than a positive impact. This is why a strategy needs to be based on something that is doable, something that you can actually achieve, and something that you can reach. Now, Renaud de Chatillon, the French crusader, is challenging the whole of the Muslim Ummah, who will save Muhammad from my hand? Salahuddin, and let me use modern terminology, sends a tweet. Actually, they used to use pigeons and send letters. So already Salahuddin has already been preparing a Muslim fleet in Egypt. So Salahuddin's first use of this fleet will be for the protection of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He sent from where today in southern Turkey, he sends a message to Egypt and to Husam al-Din Lu'lu'. He commands him to go directly with the Muslim fleet to Medina and to stop this crusader. Renaud de Chatillon is already at the port of Yambo. He sought help from who? From some of the Bedouins. Do you think the Bedouins would help Renaud de Chatillon to achieve his goal? What do you think? Do you think? 1, yes. 2, no. Let's try to keep this as interactive as possible, because I know sometimes history can get boring, but these topics are really interesting, and I don't want you to fall asleep while we are talking. So 1 or 2, do you think the Bedouins in Arabia would help Renaud de Chatillon, or they would turn him away? Number 1, they would help him. Number 2, they will not support him. What do you think? Okay, until you answer, Husam al-Din Lu'lu' takes the fleet and heads towards Medina. He reaches the port of Yambo and chases after Renaud de Chatillon and finds him just outside Medina. And yes, Zahida, Patel, and Chi, and Hanifa, all of you are saying that they would not support. Yasmin is also saying they will not support. Today, when SEPTA are saying they will not support, you think too, Maz is also saying they will not support. 007 is saying no way the Bedouins will support this. The Quran actually talks about the Bedouins as the Al-A'rabu ashaddu kufran wa nifaqa. Do you know what this verse actually means? Actually, which surah is it in? Actually, in one verse, it criticizes them, and in one verse, it praises some of them. This is in Surah At-Tawbah, chapter 9, verse 97. Surah Tawbah. Let me read the exact translation. Verse 97. It says, the Bedouins are the worst in kufr and hypocrisy, and more likely to not know what the limits which Allah has revealed to His Messenger. The verse is very harsh, and some people would say, uh, this is the example of all Bedouins. Actually, so not to generalize, the next verse actually says that some of them are very good believers, and it praises them. But the reason why I wanted to say this is that sometimes we think of some Muslim leaders as something. Oh, they are good. They're great. And so on and so forth. And when we find that they're not, that's not the case. The next verse, actually, verse 98, and I recommend that you read them. Verse 98 actually says they will try to plot against you. However, verse 99 of Surah At-Tawbah, it says, however, some of the Bedouins believe in Allah and His Messenger, and they use everything in their in their life to serve Islam. But what this actually says is that they are the worst of the hypocrites, and the worst of the kuffar are some of the Bedouins. And we see this, unfortunately, today with the normalization with the Zionists going to very low and very extreme lens, that even your enemy does not expect you to be this awful. Some of these Bedouins, just for a few golden dinars, helped Renaud de Chatillon reach the grave of the Prophet ﷺ. However, as I said, Salahuddin's commander, Hussam ad-Din Lu'lu', made it in time and arrested Renaud de Chatillon. Salahuddin said, do not kill him. I will kill him. I swear, I will kill him with my own hands. So on the return, they're taking him to Salahuddin. On the return, as they are passing by Karak, he manages to escape his imprisonment and runs off to his citadel. And Salahuddin swears for a second time. Excuse me. Salahuddin swears for the second time that he will kill this crusader with his own hands. Salahuddin falls ill north of Aleppo, and Salahuddin works really hard for Aleppo and Mosul. And I told you about the assassinations attempts by the Hashashin, the assassins, who are also a corrupt Shia fringe that broke away from Shiaism. So what we see here, Salahuddin trying with the rulers his utmost effort, and eventually the ruler of Aleppo changes, dies, and one of his relatives takes Aleppo, and Salahuddin writes to him immediately, and he says, "What do you would you give us Aleppo so we would continue?" He said, "Yes, in return for 1, 2, 3." Salahuddin immediately gives it to him. Salahuddin besieges Mosul for some time. He tries to take Mosul because Salahuddin, you might think, why is Salahuddin so adamant on fighting Muslim rulers before fighting the Crusades? Salahuddin was afraid that these Muslim rulers would go and align themselves with the Crusaders and strike him from his back. Salahuddin wanted a united Muslim front. You cannot stand face to face with the Crusaders while your back is exposed. Salahuddin wanted first to fix the Muslim problems and then head towards, but he used Bayt al-Maqdis and al-Aqsa as a uniting factor. There is nothing else that can unite the Muslims like the Masjid al-Aqsa. The Muslims differ, would disagree on everything. I am Shafi'i, you are Hanafi, he is Hanbali, Maliki, on madhab, on aqidah, he is this, that, and we will argue for centuries to come. Muslims disagree on small and big details, but one thing that two mu'min, and listen carefully, two mu'min, two believers, not two Muslim, because amongst Muslims there are hypocrites and munafiq. I am saying two mu'min, two believers will not disagree on the issue of Al-Aqsa and Bayt al-Maqdis. For this reason, Salahuddin got rid of the hypocrites and the munafiqs and the rulers who would align themselves with the Crusaders or with the assassins, and Salahuddin worked with the other governors, re-established them in their positions, and asked them, only when I ask you to send the armies, you will send the armies for the liberation of Al-Aqsa. This is all I want from you. So Salahuddin established this in quite a very in a very good way, and from there Salahuddin had an agreement with the governor of Mosul, who said yes, he will send the armies when Salahuddin requests. So Salahuddin left Mosul, and after Salahuddin's illness, he made a vow: once Allah gives him shifa, he will head directly to Bayt al-Maqdis. Salahuddin then heads towards Bayt al-Maqdis. But where does Salahuddin go? He comes to now we are in 1187. Salahuddin is now around 50 years old. Salahuddin has been the governor of Egypt for 14 years at least. And Salahuddin now heads from the north, he heads to the north of Palestine. Salahuddin comes to Hittin, to northern Palestine, around Tiberias. And Salahuddin wants to, the Crusaders have already broken the last agreement with Salahuddin. So Salahuddin wants to lure the Crusaders to come to him. But the Crusaders were quite far away. They were in Safuria, about 30 kilometers away from Salahuddin. And Salahuddin wants them to come to him because it was in the middle of the summer. What Salahuddin does is Salahuddin attacks the citadel of Tiberias, which was in Crusader hands. And this forces the Crusaders to come towards Salahuddin. Salahuddin then controls all the water on the way. It is in the middle of the summer. Salahuddin burns the fields around them, and they are wearing, the Crusader gears, their helmets, their everything is made of metal. So the heat of the sun, the fire from the fields around them, and no water, they reach Salahuddin in Hittin exhausted. And Salahuddin surrounded them, and it was the biggest battle between the Muslims and the Crusaders. And Salahuddin manages to neutralize most of the Christian army, most of the Crusader army. We're talking around 40,000 of them. And Salahuddin's army was very well prepared. Salahuddin, months before, called the different Muslims from across the Muslim world to send their armies in preparation for the Fath. And they came down, and this was the decisive battle that Salahuddin's last step before the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis. Salahuddin took this chance, and the truce again was broken by Renaud Bichatillon, and weakness and disunity amongst the Crusaders, Salahuddin used extremely well. He allowed Raymond of Tripoli to lead the field of the Battle of Hittin, and Salahuddin took the chance and managed to defeat the Crusader army in uh, in the Battle of Hittin. This battle was the most important battle that ended the Crusader presence in the region. There are many other battles before and after, but this was one of the most important and decisive battles. The Muslims' victory was not out of chance. It took a lot of preparation for the Muslims to be able to achieve this. And the Crusaders have suffered very heavy losses, and most of their leaders were either captured or killed. And we see this with the king of the Latin Kingdom of Jerusalem, Guy de Louisiane, the king's brother, Renaud de Chatillon, is now in the hands of Salahuddin. And let me continue the story of Renaud de Chatillon, because I'm sure that you are interested in the continuation of the story. Salahuddin, he saw the king was very thirsty. So Salahuddin, to show him that the Muslims are very well prepared, Salahuddin had iced water, and he had ice in his possession, not just water. The Crusader army didn't even have water. Salahuddin had ice, and he had water. So Salahuddin took a glass, put ice in it, and he handed it over to the king. And the king took it, and Salahuddin got engaged with something else. And when you give someone water in Islamic culture, what does it mean? It means that you are giving them security and safety. And Salahuddin, by giving this, it meant that he will not kill the king. The king is, at least his life is safe. The king took the cup, and then Renaud de Chatillon said to him, "Give it to me." So he handed it over to Renaud de Chatillon, and Renaud de Chatillon started drinking the iced water. Salahuddin, when he saw this, he knocked the cup off the hands of Renaud de Chatillon and said, "I did not give it to you. I did not give the water to you. I did not give you safety." And this is what Salahuddin said to Renaud de Chatillon. He brought him, and he said, "I am here now defending Muhammad from you." You can see Salahuddin never forgot what that man, when he said, "Who will save Muhammad from my hands?" Salahuddin, now when the time came, Salahuddin said to him, "I will deal with you how Rasulullah would have dealt." First, Salahuddin, you might think Salahuddin would have gone crazy and immediately killed him. Salahuddin offers him Islam. And he says, "If you accept Islam, then you are our brother immediately. And everything else is gone." The arrogance of Renaud de Chatillon, "I will never accept your religion," he said. Salahuddin then took his sword and struck him with one blow. And then the soldiers came and took his body outside. And when Guy de Louisiane, the king of Jerusalem, saw this, he got afraid that Salahuddin will also kill him. He said, "Do not worry. It is not our manner to kill the king." And Salahuddin was already planning something else for the king. And actually, you can watch this in the Kingdom of Heaven. Actually, if you haven't seen this film, although the Crusader part is not very accurate, however, this part in which he calls Renaud de Châtillon is quite accurate, and even the person acting actually represents Renaud de Châtillon quite closely to the historical narrative. Salahuddin then the whole story, you can read it in the historical books. The story is quite interesting. And Salahuddin fulfilled his oath because this man was a war criminal. He had the blood of many civilians and innocents on his hand. And Salahuddin, he broke the truce between the Muslims and the Crusades many times. And Salahuddin and tried to kill the Prophet, to take the grave of the Prophet ﷺ and his body to France. And Salahuddin did this to other war criminals. Now, after the decisive battle of Hittin, there is a lot of details in the stories how Salahuddin then sent the king and the others to prison and continued. If you were in the position of Salahuddin after Hittin, where would you head to? Would you head directly to Bayt al-Maqdis, to Jerusalem? Or what would you do? If you say, yes, I will go directly to Jerusalem, that would be number one. If you have other plans to go to other cities to secure them, then that would be number two. So let's see, amongst the 45 people with us now, how many of you say you would go directly to Jerusalem? That would be number one. Those who say that they will go to the other cities to secure them, that will be number two. MashaAllah, Ferrandi is very quick. He says he will. Sorry, he says he will first secure the other cities and then head towards Bayt al-Maqdis. Muzammil also, see, just from one lesson, MashaAllah, we are starting to pick up strategies. Nishat is saying number one, you will go directly there. Yasmin is saying number two. Nafisa wa alaykum salam. Hanifa, Noor, Imran, Yasamin, everyone is saying number two. Why is it number two? Salahuddin could have gone directly to Bayt al-Maqdis, but Salahuddin, instead of going south, Salahuddin headed towards the north. The green line that you see in front of you is Salahuddin's steps. So first he goes to Acre, Akka, and then Salahuddin heads all the way north to Beirut. He sends his men to different areas, but Salahuddin, you can see on the map, Salahuddin reaches Beirut. On reaching Beirut, Salahuddin even sends some of his armies further north. Why is Salahuddin doing this? 007, Hanifa, everyone's with the right answer. Why is Maz also? Why is Salahuddin going to the other cities? Salahuddin knows, as did the Sahaba when they liberated Bayt al-Maqdis at the time of Umar ibn Khattab, first you have to secure all the area around it and leave that to the end, because that will be one of the most difficult, that will be the most secured. And Salahuddin, for example, did not take the city of Tyre because it was very well fortified. And Salahuddin decided to leave it and continue because he was afraid that this gate that Allah has opened for him might close. So Salahuddin heads, and he was told by some of his men that, you know, you completely lose your life if you go and try to take Bayt al-Maqdis. The Crusaders will fight until the last breath. So Salahuddin first neutralized all these different cities, and then he heads Yafa, Qaysariya, Yafa, Asqalan. And Asqalan was a very important strategic port. Salahuddin after, and all throughout, Salahuddin sending them messages, the people in the city, to surrender peacefully, that he will not kill a single person. So he sent the first one, the the second one, the third one, the fourth letter. Actually, he met with the people of the city in Asqalan and he offered them very good terms for surrender. They refused and they said, "We will never give the place of our Lord Jesus Christ to you." So Salahuddin swears he will take the city by force. And in Islamic fiqh, this is something important that I would like you to bear in mind. There are two ways of conquering a city. The first is through a peace agreement or aman. And if you take the city peacefully, you cannot change anything in the city. You are not allowed to change the churches like Omar bin Khattab when he took Bayt al-Maqdis. He kept everything as it was. The second way is by war. And if you take it by war, then everything in the city belongs to you. The third way is if the people accept Islam, and then that would be everything in the city would also remain the same, and the people in the city would change it in the way they wish to do so. Salahuddin, when they refuse his last offer, heads towards the city of Bayt al-Maqdis. And this is the first time Salahuddin sets his eyes on the city. And remember, Salahuddin has never seen the city of Bayt al-Maqdis before. And when he sees Al-Aqsa Mosque, he sees it when over the Dome of the Rock there is a massive cross. And this motivates Salahuddin and the Muslims. And as Salahuddin comes to the city, he besieges it from the western side. He arrives there in September. And remember, the Battle of Hattin took place in July. Now we are in September. Also, we are in the month of Rajab. So Salahuddin arrives there on the 15th of Rajab and besieges the city from the western side. And as inside the city, there was women, children, the Patriarch Heracles, Balian of Ibelin. There was a trench around the city, the two queens in the city. The city was very well defended. And actually, there's a long story with the Balian of Ibelin. If there is time, we can mention it at the end of our discussion. Salahuddin then encircled the city for a week and then decided to move his camp from the western side to the northern side, because when he came to the western side, he found it very well fortified. So after looking around, he decided to move it a few days later, and then this was the place where he encamped his soldiers. The Crusaders will send their soldiers to fight, and the Muslims would defeat them. And this continued for a few days. The Muslims had very sophisticated siege engines, and they set up the Mongols, and they bombarded the walls. Arrows were fired, and the people defending the city, the Franks, attacked, and they killed one of the Muslim leaders. And his shahada, his martyrdom, led to increased enthusiasm amongst the Muslims, because he was a very well-respected scholar and emir, Izzuddin Isa ibn Malik. And the Muslims immediately, when they, after his shahada, they charged and crossed the trench and started sapping the walls, and parts of the walls started to collapse. And the Muslims managed to raise the Muslim flag over the city. And this is quite interesting. What happened next is that Salahuddin, the people of the city, came out to Salahuddin asking for terms, and they would like to surrender the city. Salahuddin said, "I already swore that I will take the city by force. There is no way now I will allow you to surrender, particularly after the Muslim flag was raised over the city." Then Balian of Ibelin, one of the Crusader rulers, comes out to Salahuddin and makes Salahuddin an ultimatum. He says, if you insist on taking the city by force, then we will do the following. We will kill our women and children, so we have nothing else to lose. Then we will destroy Al-Aqsa Mosque and destroy its dome, golden dome. Then we have 5,000 Muslims, prisoners. We will kill all of them. We will destroy, burn the city to the ground, and fight you till death because we have nothing else to lose. These were the terms that were offered to Salahuddin. Salahuddin gathered his generals and his men and the ulama and asked them, what do you think we should do? They said, for the Muslim prisoners and to spare the city and even the women and the children, let's accept their terms. However, they will be all enslaved. So the city will be taken by force. No one will be killed. However, the city will be taken according to Islamic law by force. Each person has 40 days to free themselves by paying for every man 10 dinar, for every woman 5 dinar, and for children 2 dinars, that they would pay this within 40 days. And they would not take anything from the city, and they would return back to their homes, to Europe, where they came from a century earlier, where their grandparents came from a century earlier, and never fight the Muslims again. The Crusaders surrendered with accepting these terms. Salahuddin allowed many Christians to leave the city. Although they were not allowed to take anything from the city, the Patriarch took all the gold from the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. The queens asked to be reunited with their husbands, and Salahuddin reunited them with them. Balian paid 30,000 dinars for the poor. Salahuddin did not take any money from the local Christians. So the local Christians from Urfa, Armenians, others, Salahuddin let them off because they are not Crusaders, they are local Christians. And in this way, the city surrendered on the day the Prophet ﷺ came on the night journey, on the day of the 27th of 27th of Rajab, in the same month we are in today. We are in the month of Rajab, 2 months away from Ramadan. Salahuddin took the city on the 27th of Rajab, in the anniversary of the night journey. Salahuddin, the Muslim army, was rejoicing. We took it with our swords. We managed to liberate the city with our swords. We are the ones that did it. And Salahuddin said to his rejoicing men, do not think I conquered this land with your swords. I conquered it with the pen, with the knowledge of Al-Qadi al-Fadil, the virtuous judge, who was by the side of Salahuddin, a great scholar, who would write to the different rulers, to different Muslims, inviting them for the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis. Salahuddin said, actually, the conquest was not because of your swords. The conquest was because of the pen, the knowledge that Al-Qadi al-Fadil spread. And he stayed by the side of Salahuddin for days to come. Salahuddin cleansed up the area of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, took the cross down from the top of the Dome of the Rock, which has been there for 80 years. This cross, Salahuddin took it down and re-established Islam back at Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Salahuddin cleansed the whole area, took the different structures added by the Crusaders, marble that they placed over the rock. The pictures and images were all taken down. and Salahuddin eventually uh, uh, came after taking the marble down, took a gift. Remember when our discussion, the idea of gifts, Salahuddin, and during his time, the 5 things that we said we should all do by making dua every day, by learning something. This was actually something that Nuruddin Zinki followed. And one of them, sending the gift to Al Aqsa, we see that when Salahuddin was in Diyarbakir in southern Turkey today, the woman of Diyarbakir, in fulfillment of the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sent the gift to Al Aqsa, had prepared rose water for the cleansing of the blessed rock, the Qibla of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and uh, uh, the place where he ascended to heaven from. Salahuddin took this rose water. I'm drinking water, not rose water. Salahuddin took the rose water and cleansed the rock with his own hands. The place where the Crusaders have turned into a church for 88 years, Salahuddin cleansed it with his own hands and thanked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for giving him this honor. He also brought the minbar of his teacher Nuruddin Zinki from Aleppo, who also prepared a gift for Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. This gift took Nuruddin Zinki, who worked to liberate Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa all his life. It took him 20 years to build this minbar. And without a single nail in it, like a puzzle piece, the whole minbar is brought together with the most beautiful perfume, and it was placed inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa from 1187 until 1969, when a Christian Zionist burnt this minbar uh, on that date in 1969. A Christian Zionist from Australia came and burned Al-Jami' Al-Aqsa and the minbar of Nur ad-Din. This minbar stayed in Al-Aqsa Mosque for 708 years. Every khutbah so when I told you, think of a gift that you will give to Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, think of a gift that will last there for 700-800 years, 1,000 years. This is what Nur ad-Din Zinki thought of, a gift that will last for not 1 or 2 days, a gift that will last for centuries to come. And his gift, every khutbah delivered from this minbar in Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, the reward of it was going back to Nur ad-Din Zinki in his grave. I'd really recommend that also you read the first khutbah delivered, it's translated into English, the first sermon delivered in Al-Aqsa Mosque by Ibn al-Zaki. Ibn al-Zaki was Salahuddin. After the liberation of Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa, it took a week to cleanse Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa from the Crusader remnants, and Salahuddin had a competition for who will deliver the best khutbah, and chose the khutbah of Imam Ibn al-Zaki, who was the Qadi of Aleppo. Salahuddin allowed him to deliver the first khutbah, the liberation khutbah, on the 4th of Sha'ban inside Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And if I read a few words from it, amazing. I really recommend. Actually, the first person to mention this to me was a convert to Islam, Jack Kilby, Muhsin Kilby, who accepted Islam together with Yusuf Islam in the 80s and visited us in Palestine. And he was part of a team that created the first documentary on the first Intifada. And he had 3 exhibitions on Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. And he passed away about it's been exactly 2 years. May Allah have mercy on his soul. He passed away in London. Brother Muhsin Kilby, or Jack Kilby, he is the first one to mention this khutbah to me. He read it in the British Library. And this is part of the khutbah. I will read just the parts right in front of you. And imagine the feeling the Muslims had after liberating Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. And he says, rejoice at the purifying of this house. It was the dwelling place of your father Ibrahim, the spot from which your Prophet Muhammad ascended to the heavens, the Qibla towards which you have turned to pray at the commencement of Islam. And he's addressing them as if they were the Sahaba. It is the Qibla you turned to pray at the commencement of Islam, the abode of the prophets, the place visited by saints, the place where the prophets escaped to, the spot where the divine revelation descended, and to which the commands and the prohibitions were sent down. It is the land where humankind will be assembled for judgment on the day of judgment, the ground where resurrection will take place, the Holy Land, where of God has spoken in His precious book in Surah Al Imran. The khutbah is very long, and it reminds the Muslims of the days of Badr and Uhud and Yarmouk and Qadisiyah. Really recommend, yes, reading the khutbah of Muhyiddin Ibn Zaki. It is an amazing khutbah, and it gives you exactly what Bayt al-Maqdis meant to these men, and how they managed to prepare the Muslims spiritually, religiously, politically, and militarily for the liberation of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. It was not something that they achieved over 1 or 2 days. It took many days to, and not many days, many years to prepare for the liberation of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. So for us today, we need to really think how far are we on our roadmap for the liberation of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, you see the people working to liberate it are not just Arabs, they're not just Turks, they are of every Muslim group. They are from the east and the west. They are people who believe in Allah and His Messenger and have worked towards the liberation of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa and to regain it back from the Crusaders. Salahuddin also inside Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, above, until today you see this, above the mihrab, you see here in the earlier picture, you have the minbar. Next to it, you have the mihrab. Above the mihrab, the name of Salahuddin still is written there. From that day until today, the name of Salahuddin is still not just written there, it is written in many different places inside Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. And it reads 835 years later, in the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most compassionate, the renovation of this holy mihrab and the reconstruction of Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is based on various foundations, was by the servant of Allah, Yusuf ibn Ayyub, Abu al-Mudaffar, the victorious king, Salah al-Dunya wa-Din, when Allah liberated it by the will of Allah on the hands of Salahuddin during the months of the year 583, which is 1187 in the common calendar, and he supplicates to Allah to enable him to praise him for his grace and to grant him forgiveness and mercy. This is how Salahuddin liberated Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, and this is what Salahuddin did in the process until we reached this great day, and to pray the prayer of Fath, the prayer of conquest inside the Masjid al-Aqsa. What this meant to Salahuddin and what this meant to his men is quite incredible, that they were amongst the first to fulfill this great action and to liberate the Masjid al-Aqsa from after 88 years of very difficult occupation, after Al-Aqsa has been a stable for Crusader horses, churches, It's been many of its building has been turned into churches, like the Dome of the Rock into the Lord's Temple, the Dome of the Chain into Saint Stephen's Chapel. Al-Jami' al-Aqsa, the mihrab, was turned into a toilet. This was the situation of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, and Allah brought the conquest and the liberation of it on the hands of Salahuddin. May we see the liberation of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa in our lifetime, inshallah Azza wa Jal. To end with Salahuddin's story here, this didn't end here. And next week we will continue with the different Crusader, and I will send you an article, the Crusader mentality, that I have recently written, to see the different generations from the time of Salahuddin until the British occupation of Al-Aqsa and Bayt al-Maqdis in 1917. From Salahuddin until 1917, the Crusades never stopped. The Crusader mentality continued in Western Europe. And immediately when Salahuddin took the city from the Crusades, the Third Crusade was to be launched. And the Third Crusade was led by Richard the Lionheart, Philippe of France, and the German Emperor. And Salahuddin was in a very difficult position because the German army alone was 200,000 men. And this army would wipe off the Muslims off the face of the earth. And most of the Muslims, after the liberation of the Masjid al-Aqsa, then returned to their homes. They went back to North Africa, they went back to different places, and Salahuddin was left with a small number to defend the city. And Salahuddin Ibn Shaddad, I recommend you read the work of Ibn Shaddad, Al-Nawadir al-Sultaniyya. It's also translated into English. The translation is actually not bad. There are some mistakes in parts of it, but generally it's a very good translation. Salahuddin was left on his own, and he felt in despair. What will happen if the Crusaders come and take back the city? He was really afraid, and Ibn Shaddad told him to make dua at a particular time on the day of Friday. And he says, we were in Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, and I can see Salahuddin, the carpet in front of him was so wet from the tears that he was crying to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to help him and to protect Al-Masjid al-Aqsa after it's been liberated. After all the effort that has been put in place, to lose it again would be a great loss to the Muslims. And immediately after the Salah, the news comes to Salahuddin that the German king has drowned in a very shallow river of water close to Tartus in southern Turkey today. So they've marched all the way, halfway to Anatolia, and they were about a month later, they would have taken the city. However, the qadr and the fate was waiting for him there, and he died in that area. And most of his 200,000 strong army dispersed, and only 5,000 of them managed to reach the city. At the same time, Richard the Lionheart besieged Acre, and Philippe of France, they managed to besiege Acre and murder and kill in front of Salahuddin 3,000 Muslim prisoners, execute them. Salahuddin lost some battles against Richard, and Salahuddin's negotiation with Richard the Lionheart. There's a very interesting article by Dr. Maher Abu Munshar on this topic that I also recommend that you read. The negotiation between Richard the Lionheart and Salahuddin. um, and the position of Islamic Jerusalem. Uh, if I can find it, I will share it with you. Yes, the negotiation between Sultan Salahuddin and Richard the Lionheart, and it concentrates on the position of Islamic Jerusalem uh, in uh, in this in this. And what is really fascinating with this is that Richard says to Salahuddin, "Go back to where you come from. This is the land of the Crusades. You go back to where you came from." And Salahuddin responds in a very interesting response, in which he says, Jerusalem is ours as much as it is yours. But for us, it is greater. So Salahuddin is very inclusive. He's not exclusive in his dealing with Richard. Uh, and Salahuddin could have also, some of his generals said to him to destroy the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And Salahuddin said, Umar ibn Khattab didn't do this. I cannot do this. So Salahuddin was relatively, actually, he was inclusive when you compare him to the Crusades. He didn't shed their blood. He didn't kill them. This is the what Islam teaches. Salahuddin is not acting from his head. This is the mercy of Islam that today they try to show it in a very negative image. However, what Salahuddin was acting upon was what Islam, what he has learned from Islam and from Umar ibn Khattab in particular on this issue. And he says, Jerusalem is for us and it is for you. But for us, it is much greater because it is the place where our Prophet, so you understand what it meant to Salahuddin. It is the place where the Mi'raj, the night journey, took place. It is the place where the angels gathered. Do not think that we will ever give it up, or even mention the idea of giving it up amongst the Muslims. It is impossible. So you can see what actually Bayt al-Maqdis means to Salahuddin al-Ayyubi in his own words. He was not exclusive like Richard, who says, go back to where you come from. Salahuddin says, you are welcome in this place, but under Muslim sovereignty. You are able to come and visit your Christian places. We do not have the slightest problem with that. After negotiations between Salahuddin and Richard, and you can read it in this article in some detail. You can see how Salahuddin eventually, Richard actually became, he never met Salahuddin face to face, but he became obsessed with Salahuddin's generosity, and he said to Salahuddin al-Ayyubi that even if you just give me a single city in which I can go back to Europe and be able to at least go back saying that I managed to achieve something. Please at least give me something that I can go back to Europe with and try to give give back something. Eventually, Salahuddin signed the Ramla peace treaty with him, which creates peace between the Muslim and the Crusaders for 10 years. These are the words of Salahuddin. Al-Quds is ours as much as it is yours. Indeed, for us, it is greater than it is for you, for it is where our Prophet came on his night journey and the gathering place of the angels. Let not the king imagine that we shall give it up, for we are not able to breathe a word of that amongst the Muslims. These were the words of Salahuddin. Salahuddin al-Ayyubi was one of the greatest Muslim leaders. What made Salahuddin actually was Bayt al-Maqdis. Salahuddin says this with his own words. What created Salahuddin, what made him have an aim in his life was Al-Aqsa and Bayt al-Maqdis. But after, and we will finish with this in the next 7 minutes, we will wrap up the discussion and maybe take a few questions. So if you start writing your questions from now, if you have anything on Salahuddin before we turn the page, and next week bring up this Crusader mentality, that the continuation of the colonialist project from the Crusaders to Zionism. So we'll try next week to cover that, and sorry, in the next class and final class to bring it up to the situation that we are living today in Al-Aqsa and in Bayt al-Maqdis. Why did I stop here? There was something in my mind that slipped my mind. Yes, so Salahuddin, we see he stood against the Third Crusade, managed to, like Nuruddin, ended the Second Crusade. Salahuddin managed to liberate Bayt al-Maqdis and to bring an end to the Third Crusade, and they were not able to achieve the peace treaty for 10 years. Some of the coastal areas will stay in the hands of the Crusaders, particularly the city of Tyre, which Salahuddin regretted not taking because it became a stronghold for the Crusaders and the place where they started to gather for further attacks on the city. Salahuddin defended and prepared his defenses very, very well. And Salahuddin actually, he was preparing for Hajj, and he wanted to fulfill the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he starts his Hajj from Al-Masjid Al-Aqsa. So he wore his ihram, he was ready to go when the news of the Third Crusade came to him. So Salahuddin didn't make Hajj. And this is what's interesting, that Salahuddin died without making Hajj. But as I mentioned to you before, for Salahuddin al-Ayyubi, many people have made Hajj on his behalf until today. Muslims continue to make Hajj on behalf of Salahuddin, for he has not been able to make Hajj. And I mentioned, I think, that story to you before. So if we wrap up, Salahuddin was the second to liberate Bayt al-Maqdis, second Muslim leader. The first was Umar ibn Khattab after the preparation of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The second was Salahuddin al-Ayyubi after the preparation of his teacher Nuruddin, mentor, and his father Imaduddin, and the work of the ulama. And as Salahuddin made it very clear, do not think I liberated this land with your swords. I liberated this land with the pen of Al-Qadi Al-Fadil. Knowledge is the most important thing. And we are at this stage that people are there to take steps for the liberation of the Masjid al-Aqsa. We need to first take these steps seriously by creating awareness, and knowledge is the first step for the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis. And the 5 points that we talked about, Nuruddin Zinki created the minbar as a gift, but he also created a mihrab. He called it the mihrab of Al-Quds, that people will come here, make sujood, and make dua for al-Masjid al-Aqsa. People need to learn through the books of Fada'il Bayt al-Maqdis, why is this place important? People need to follow what is happening in that land and make sure that they have taken real steps for the liberation of al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Actually, this class, if this lesson was just on Nuruddin Zinki, time would not be sufficient. If it was just on one part of the life of Salahuddin, it would not be sufficient. but the life of Salahuddin was so great. But I want to end with one point in the life of Salahuddin. Salahuddin, after he achieved his goal was to liberate Bayt al-Maqdis from the Crusades. Remember, this goal was set by Salahuddin. Oh, no, we're going too far back, so let's skip going back. Let's come to Salahuddin after when he became Salahuddin, when he became the ruler of Egypt, he knew Allah put it in his heart that he will liberate the Holy Land and Bayt al-Maqdis and Al-Aqsa. He said these words. Allah put it in his heart, the liberation of the coastal area. After he liberated Bayt al-Maqdis, he was standing one evening on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and there was very high tides. And Ibn Shaddad says to him, these words are recorded by Ibn Shaddad. These words show us that Salahuddin's next aim from Bayt al-Maqdis, once you take Bayt al-Maqdis, you have to go global. Salahuddin says, Ibn Shaddad actually says to him, I will never ever get on a ship. These waves are like, these tides are like mountains. You can drown and no one will ever know that you had died. So Salahuddin said to him, you know what I'm going to do? This is my final aim in this life. After I settle everything in this city, I am going to make my will, my wasiyah, and I will take the following steps. First, I will, after Allah gives me after I complete the conquest of the coastal area, I will give my wasiyah, I will say my farewell, and then I will go on the ships and follow them to their islands. Follow them. He wanted to come to England, to Italy. Salahuddin's next aim after liberating Bayt al-Maqdis, you'll be shocked. Salahuddin wanted to come to Europe. To come to Europe to do what? To be a refugee? Like most Muslims are going to Europe today as refugees? No. Salahuddin wanted to come to Europe to make sure that he will follow the Crusaders in their land, to make sure that no one on the face of this earth will disbelieve in Allah. He will invite people to Islam. So Salahuddin's next aim after the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis was he will come to across Europe. He will come to Scotland and to England and to Wales, where the Crusaders came from. He will come to Germany and to France and to Italy and follow the Crusaders to the places where they had come from and invite them to Islam until no one on the face of this earth is left disbelieving in Allah or he dies in the process. You can see what made Salahuddin a great man. Salahuddin today in Western literature, he is seen as, even some Christian sources claim that Salahuddin was secretly a Christian because he was so great. Muslims are not this passionate and this compassionate and this merciful. It is impossible that Salahuddin would have been a Muslim. This is the level that some Christians, if you read even in Dante, in Divine Comedy, he talks about Salahuddin as being in the lowest level, in the highest level of hell, because Salahuddin was such a great man that he doesn't deserve to be in the lowest levels of the hellfire. So Salahuddin is someone, even in Western literature, he's seen as someone great. Even he's presented as a better leader than even Richard the Lionheart in these sources. Salahuddin presented the great example of a Muslim, a compassionate, merciful Muslim. And it is incredible what Salahuddin's impact was on Europe for centuries and centuries to come. So you can see Salahuddin's first aim was liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis. The second aim was the conquest of the world and the spread of Islam to the whole of humanity. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy on Salahuddin. Today his name is engraved on the walls of the Masjid al-Aqsa. This is the Dome of Yusuf, directly opposite the Dome of the Rock, and it has the name Maulana Salah al-Nasir, Salah al-Dunya wal-Din, Sultan al-Islami wal-Muslimin, the Sultan of Islam and Muslims, Salah al-Dunya wal-Din. His name was actually Yusuf, so it is written his full name here. Uh, he passed away on the 4th of March 1193, just 5 years after the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis, and on the 27th of Safar 589. His grave is in Damascus, just behind the Umayyad Mosque, and I was blessed to visit and stand right in front of this great man. May Allah have mercy on his soul and grant this ummah many great men that Allah gives hidayah to, like Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. We can stop here, maybe take a few questions.
Yes, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Khalid. What a great legend Salahuddin was. As you said, Amin to your du'as. We have around 3 questions. I think one of them you kind of answered half of it. When Richard de Chatillon went to Medina, was there no government there, descendants of Sahaba, a ruler, anything?
There was. It was part of the Abbasid Khilafah, most of the area. However, what we talked about, I don't like the generalization of all Bedouins are bad, because the Quran says some of them are great believers in Allah. But I mention this because unfortunately, they we see today some of the worst examples are of people coming from that part of the world, and some great examples from people coming from that part of the world. But at that time, the governor was associated with different Muslim governments, but was unable to, on his own, defend the city. So for this reason, there was a need of the intervention for Salahuddin when we know Bishatyon came to Medina.
Okay. Jazakallah khair for your answer. We have a question from WhatsApp that came through. As we're in the month of Rajab and observing of Al-Isra wal Mi'raj being 27th of Rajab, the Prophet ﷺ was asked, if one of us cannot visit Al-Aqsa, what should we do? He ﷺ said, then he should make a gift of some oil to be lit therein in its lamps. For indeed, the one who gives this to it will be like the one who gives this, it will be like the one who has prayed there worth 1,000 prayers. Sahih Ahmed. It would be nice to give light to Al-Aqsa. Do you know of any reputable charities or organization who do this?
Yes, actually, there are. This hadith, you can understand it as we said, sending a gift to Al Masjid Al Aqsa. There are many campaigns in the UK and in different parts of the world. So, depending on where the person is asking from, uh, you can get your
I
gift
think
across.
it's from the UK, the person who
From
asked. So
yes, from the UK, there is two, actually quite a few charities that support Al Masjid Al Aqsa. One of them is Bayt al-Maqdis Foundation. The name is Bayt al-Maqdis Foundation. The second is one of the co-organizers with us in this program, I Love Al-Aqsa. I think the website would be active during before the end of the month of Rajab, inshallah. And many of the projects that they work on is the idea of sending symbolic gifts to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. So it is not just the anniversary of the Isra and Mi'raj, it's also the anniversary of the liberation of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. So we need to think, remember when we talked about it as the fifth thing that we should do, um, send our gift to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, prepare a gift for the liberation of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. Think big. Think of something that you can get across today, Quran or something that you can get across to Al-Masjid al-Aqsa. But think of your gift for the liberation of Al-Masjid al-Aqsa, which would be something great. So these are two organizations that do this in the UK. In Turkey, there's tens of charities that do this, but some of them actually take this. The idea of bringing light to Al Masjid Al Aqsa is by supporting the people in the city. So by supporting the people, you are encouraging them to go to Al Aqsa, and you are keeping them steadfast. So supporting the people around Al Masjid Al Aqsa is also another way to keep Al Masjid Al Aqsa's latrines lit.
Jazakallah khair. I will try to link the organizations and the articles you mentioned in the
Yes.
next email we send, inshallah.
Inshallah.
We have two more questions. Were there many converts to Islam after the conquest?
After the liberation of Salahuddin, actually Salahuddin, the number of the Crusaders that accepted Islam is not known, but we know that of many Crusaders who did accept Islam, but the numbers are not known, and uh, how many of them converted to Islam after the conquest, I cannot recall any source talking about uh, mass conversion. Most of them actually left back to Europe and or regrouped in Tyre and Acre and joined the next crusades and fought against the Muslims. So I don't think there was a lot of conversion, but we know of some stories of uh, uh, crusaders who did accept Islam and stay amongst the Muslims.
Thank you for answering that question. Um, we have a kind of big question to answer. How do you anticipate for the future liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis? It's like in a wider picture.
Mm. Actually, history, when we talk about history, the reason why we talk about history is to learn lessons for the future. And actually, when the Arab Spring started, I was studying Salahuddin, and I looked at the map that I showed you earlier, and I looked at the map of the places that were in turmoil in the region, starting from Tunisia all the way to Egypt, to Libya, to Yemen. And it just clicked into my mind that these are the countries that will have what is happening. I will come to the second point. What is happening today in these areas is a precursor to the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis. And this will end the Zionist occupation of Al-Aqsa Mosque. However, what happened with turning the tides of the Arab Spring and um, transferring it into taking it into another direction brought an end to this mass movement of the public, because the leaders are associated with, unfortunately, the United States and Western governments, and they do not act without their permission. I'm talking about all Arab states without exception, unfortunately. For this reason, there is actually the people of Bayt al-Maqdis and the people of Palestine have no hope in Muslim leaders and Arab leaders in particular, and their only hope is in the public. And this movement, the Arab Spring, actually started this. And Palestine and Al-Aqsa was in every single square being chanted in Tunisia, in Cairo, in Tahrir Square, in different places. Al-Aqsa and Palestine, even the Palestinian flag was present in all the demonstrations. So in a sense, people's hearts are connected to this one way or another. How do we anticipate the future liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis? We have to follow the historical examples for us to be able to achieve this. We have two perfect examples. The example of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, started by the Prophet and fulfilled by Umar ibn Khattab. The second example is the example of the ulama, going through Imad al-Din, Nur al-Din, and being fulfilled by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi. They both give us a roadmap, and this roadmap, we talked about it, that we can work individually, because we can talk about it in terms of the public or as an individual. As an individual, the 5 points that we ask everyone to do is your starting point for the liberation. If the Ummah wakes up and works together towards this, unity is something that we need to add from the example of Salahuddin, uniting the Muslims around the common goal. And this was achieved by Salahuddin al-Ayyubi perfectly. After many, many struggles, it took many years, but this is a topic that everyone will be able, every believer will be able to have a common aim for the liberation of Bayt al-Maqdis.
Jazakallah khairan for answering the questions. Inshallah, we will see that one day, the liberation of Masjid al-Aqsa in our day and time. It's always in our du'as, and it's always a dream for us to visit it, inshallah. Um, Jazakallah khair, Dr. Khalid, and we can't wait for the next lecture to learn more about this and the
Inshallah.
great history behind it.
If for the next lecture I've sent an article called The Continuation of the Colonialist Project from the Crusaders to Zionism, if people can read it, it will make our discussion next time much more smoother, because we're talking about 7, 8 centuries. So in order to be able to cover it much quicker, I'll really appreciate if people can read this before our next lecture 2 weeks later.
Inshallah, we will link it and to the emails and remind them, inshallah.
Inshallah.
So,
Thank you very much.
Jazakumullah khair. Okay, I think we can end it now.
Inshallah. Thank you again, and we'll see you next in the next class in 2 weeks later. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaykum assalam.